All right. It has been a little while since my first upload. Been working on a lot of stuff lately, some big projects. I'm almost at a stopping point with those where I can actually start to create some content and share some of those other things that I'm working on. But before I finish those out, I wanted to do something a little bit lighter, a little bit easier. And I thought I would share a tool that I created. This is, just as the name implies, it is a trade entry calculator. It's a calculator that I made that can help you work out an entry position, or an entry price, rather. Um, Now, how I like to trade usually is when I have a potential setup, the trade that I'm thinking about entering, the first thing that I do is I work out my target price and my stop price. So where would I take profits if the trade goes in my favor, and where would I cut my losses if the trade goes against me? I think it's important to have those two things worked out before you enter the trade. That way you have a plan going in and you can actually place a quantity on how much you stand to gain and how much you stand to lose. So there's no surprises and you have a plan. I think it's always good to have a plan. But that is just my trading style. So what this calculator does is you give it a stop price, you give it a target price, you give it a desired reward to risk ratio, and it will give you an entry price that satisfies all three of those. You can also put in a loss tolerance, how much you're willing to lose, and it will tell you exactly how many shares you can afford to buy with your specified loss tolerance. So you can do this mathematically. It's a little bit tedious and time consuming though, and if you are actively trading, especially on the smaller time frames, like if you're day trading, it can really be a pain to have to work this stuff out on the fly in real time. So I made this tool, really simplifies the process. I also have a version that I'm working on in Java. This is just using the Java FX framework. And it's cool. It's got some extra features. The main thing I like is it has this always on top button, so I can do other things. I can work with my trading software, and this calculator will always stay on top and always visible. You can turn that button off and it goes away. Bring it back, turn it on, and it stays. Also, another thing you can do is specify the precision of the currency. For instance, some assets you can trade down to 1/1000th of a dollar, so like 1/10 or 1/10 of a cent, or no, 1/100th of a cent. I don't know, 4 decimal places instead of 2. So this allows you to specify that, and also the asset precision. My Excel calculator, it only does whole shares, so it will tell you how many, integer number of shares or asset you can buy. Some things, like with cryptocurrency, you can do like 1/1 millionth or something. I don't know, like Bitcoin, I think you can do it to like 9 decimal places, I believe, with some brokers. And that's good. Other some brokerages also allow you to buy fractional shares of stocks. So if you can buy fractional shares, this would be helpful, but it's not really complete, not something that I feel comfortable releasing just yet. So if people are interested in that, then let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to have a completed version that people can use and download for free. This, however, this Excel calculator, I think most people have access to Excel. This also works in Google Sheets, I believe. That's what it's called, Sheets. Yeah, I've tested it. It does work. And I have this available. If you check the description, there will be a link to where you can download this for free. So if that's all you want to do, then look at the description, download the calculator, use it. If you want to know how this is created, if you want to know the math behind it, or if you just don't feel comfortable downloading files from strangers on the internet, I'm with you there. So stick around and I will show you how you can create this yourself. Also, with that link, you can download this text file. This text file is really just a write-up of all the functions, everything that's in the individual cells of this calculator. I really created this for me while I was making it, because Excel, you can do a lot. I think people underestimate the things you can really do with Excel. But for this, I don't think Excel was really designed for complex functions like this, and it's a bit clunky trying to type this out in the cells. This little editor here is not very useful. So what I found was that it was easier if I expanded these functions out so I could get a better idea of what I was doing. And then once I completed the function, I would condense it down into these little one-line things here and then just copy and paste it into the cell where I wanted it to go. But I just said a lot, so let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do is go through the math. And like I said, the math is not too complicated. I think it's helpful to visualize first what we're doing here. So let me give myself some room. What we want to do is we want to find a price. We have a few things that we know. We have an entry price that we don't know what we're trying to figure out. So let's just lay everything out. Let's imagine a number line, start at 0 and then you'd have some, for this purpose, let's just say we're talking about a long position. So our stop price is going to be the lowest price, and above the stop price we'll have our entry price. Above our entry price we'll have our target price. So I have a stop price, and at some point we'll have an entry price, and then target price, and then this would go off to positive infinity. This is my makeshift number line here. So it starts at 0. It's going to go until it gets to our stop price. And then we have entry price, E, and finally our target price. So we got 3 prices that we know here. And what do we want to find? We want to find E. Let me give some space here. E, such that our profit is equal to some multiple R times our potential loss. So find E such that profit is equal to R. R would be our reward to risk ratio. That would be reward over risk. So if you wanted, say, a 2-to-1 reward to risk ratio, that means your profit would be 2 times your loss. I like to do it that way. Some people do risk over reward. In that case, you would usually end up with a number. If your potential reward is bigger than your risk, you would end up with a number between 0 and 1, which I think is kind of awkward to work with. I like to do reward over risk. My potential profit is always going to be greater than my potential loss when I'm constructing my trades. So I would always end up with a positive number greater than 1. Anyway, that's just said a whole lot. It's kind of beside the point. So find E such that our profit is equal to some multiple R times our potential loss. How do we find profit and loss? Well, we can also infer these other variables here. So we have the difference. Just give me a second. Bear with me here. All right, we got these spaces, these variables that we can sort of infer. This right here, the difference between entry price and stop price, that would be our potential loss. And then difference between our target price and entry price, that would be our potential profit. So we can calculate these mathematically. I know we don't know what E is yet, but we can represent our profit and our loss by saying that our profit is equal to T minus E. The difference between T and E, that's our potential profit. Likewise, our loss is equal to the difference between our entry price and our stop price. This actually works out the same for a short position and a long position. The math is exactly the same. The only difference would be rounding, because when you actually work this out, you're going to end up, most of the time, you're not going to end up with something that's down to specific cents, precise dollars and cents. You're going to have to round. So with you'd want to round towards whatever's the more favorable outcome. If it is a long position, then whatever number you end up with, if you have to round it, you'd want to round it down. So that way you are always either equal to or less than your your greatest loss. Hope that makes sense. Pretty straightforward. So now, anyway, I like to ramble in these videos. Now that we can represent profit and loss in terms of target price, entry price, and stop loss, we can just write out this equation. So we can replace profit with terms of E and T. So T minus E, keep it capital, that is equal to, that's our profit, remember, on one side of the equation. T minus E is equal to R times, what is our loss? That is E minus S. Okay, so now we have this profit equals ratio times loss. We have that expressed in terms of T, E, and S. Now we need to get E on one side of the equation. Pretty easy to do. This is really just basic algebra. First thing, let's expand out to T minus E. Let's distribute this R. So R, if you remember back to high school algebra, you remember the distributive, for me it was high school, for some of you, you might have gone to better school districts and it was middle school or something, but the distributive property, if you have A times B plus or minus C, that is equal to A, B plus or minus A, C. That is the distributive property in algebra. So we can do the same thing with R here. We can do RE minus RS. So now we have that separated out, not equals, minus RS. Now let's get all of the E terms on the same side of the equation. So T, I want to move this RS over. This is a minus RS, so when I move it over it becomes positive RS. And now let's move the E over, equal to RE, stays there, stays the same. But now since we're moving this E over, it becomes a plus E. Okay, and this is a point where I think a lot of people would get stuck. How do we get this E away from this R? Well, we can use a reverse distributive property. So just like A time, whatever, what we did up here, we can do the reverse of that. But the problem is E does not have a coefficient. We can give it a coefficient. We can call it 1, because 1 times anything is itself. Anything times 1 is equal to itself. So putting a coefficient of 1 to that E, what we end up with is RE plus 1E. And then we can change that into, we can extract the E from that and end up with E times R plus 1. Did I do that right? Yeah, think so. Okay, so now what we have is T plus RS is equal to E times R plus 1, not exclamation point, 1. And now to isolate E, all we have to do is divide by R plus 1. So then what we end up with is T, what did I do? Put caps lock on. That's not what I wanted. T plus RS divided by R plus 1 is equal to E. And there it is. That is the equation that I used. I think there might be another way to get to E, but I think this is the most straightforward way to do it. Just represent profit and loss in terms of E and T, and then basic algebra gets you how to find E given that you already have a target price, a stop loss, and a desired reward to risk ratio. That's it. Yeah, and if you're putting in values that make sense, then you should not really end up with any kind of an error. You'll notice that since we have a denominator here with a variable, if this denominator equals 0, then you will have an undefined for this equation. But the only way that will happen is if your reward to risk ratio is equal to -1, which doesn't make any sense. So as long as you're using real world numbers, then you will get a real entry price that is between your target price and your stop price. And of course, if your target price is equal to your stop price, then you will end up with a entry price that is equal to both stop price and target price. You can do some weird stuff. You play around with this, play around with the numbers. You can get some wonky values that don't really make sense in the real world. But as long as you're using real world values, you should get a usable outcome. If you have something that is crazy, like a 10 to 1 reward to risk ratio, what you might end up with is an entry price that's so close to your stop price that you end up rounding to your stop price. So your entry price will be equal to your stop price. And in that case, if you were to actually enter a trade like that, then you would immediately get stopped out. You would hopefully break even on the trade. Hopefully not. When you have a stop loss, what happens is usually a market order is generated once the price reaches your stop price, and then you might end up actually getting out of the trade at a less than your stop price or greater than your stop price in the case of a short position. Anyway, that's the point. This calculator is meant for people with common sense and people who have some experience, know what they're doing, understand various types of orders, stop orders, what happens when you place a stop order, what happens when that stop order is reached. Basically you should already know what you're doing when you use this calculator. Probably should have said that at the beginning of the video, but this has a very ominous warning label here at the top of it, so hopefully anyone using this calculator will read that and have an understanding of what you're doing. So just to demonstrate that this works, let's just say, using fake values here, let's say I was looking at a stop price of, let's say I had a support level at, I don't know, $9, and I wanted to go 50 cents. I would allow 50 cents below that support level. So $9, my stop price would be $8.50. Target price, let's say my target price would be $12. Let's say there's a resistance at 12. Actually, let's do less than that. Let's say I want to do 11.95. I always like to do before resistance level, even though this is just numbers that I made up anyway. And I want a 2 to 1 reward to risk ratio. See, it knows that it's a long entry. Gives me my ideal entry price. This is rounded to the more favorable outcome. It says or lower, so I can anywhere between $9.65 or lower. That will give me a 2 to 1 or greater reward to risk ratio. And then down here, if I want to type in my max loss, my maximum loss tolerance, let's say $100. I'm willing to lose $100 on this trade. It tells me that I can buy a maximum of 86 shares. It tells me my total position size. So this position, I will need to have either this much free cash or this much available margin to take this trade. Then my estimated profit would be $197.80. My estimated loss would be $98.90. So notice that's under my loss tolerance, but it is not exactly my max loss tolerance. That is because it rounds, and it will round towards the more favorable entry position, and it will also round towards the nearest whole number of shares that you can purchase. So your loss will always be less than or equal to whatever your specified loss tolerance is. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. This is a tool that I use quite frequently in trading. It makes things a lot quicker, a lot simpler. I don't have to work out a lot of tedious math. I don't have to guess. Another way you could do this is just kind of guess. If your broker allows you to type in your orders, your entry price, your stop price, your target price, that's historically what I would do before I made this calculator. Rather than work out the math every time, it was easier to type in my orders, and my broker would show like what the loss and what the profit would be. So I would just kind of guess intuitively where I think it would be, and I would keep adjusting it until I got to a place where my loss and my reward were at the ratio that I wanted them to be. That still takes time. This is much quicker. So this is what I use now. Actually, I use my Java version that's not quite complete yet, but complete enough for me to use it and know what I'm doing with it. But before I made that, this is what I used. And I guess now I can kind of go into how I made this. Let me close out of this because I don't need it anymore. And let me change the view on here. What view? There. And, well, that's not what I want. It's been doing that lately. I don't know why. Okay, there we go. How I did this was I've got some data validation. So let's just say, for instance, if I type in a negative number, put -2, it's going to give me an error. I did that with some clever data validation. So over here, hidden in this margin, is actually another function that tells me if this number is blank, I want it to display a certain value, and if it's another value, then I want it to display a different value. So it tells me, it can tell if a value is not what it's supposed to be. And I know Excel kind of has built-in data validation. That didn't really work for my purposes here because I wanted to put custom messages. So that's just kind of a cool little feature that I added to it. Not at all necessary. I've spent way more time on this than I needed to for it to work and be effective. But it was a fun little project, and I think it really pushes the limits of Excel. You can do a lot with Excel. It's fun to play around with. I like to do sometimes programming stuff just to see like what all I can get Excel to do that it wasn't necessarily meant to be able to do. And this is a fun little example. So that's it. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments. Let me know if there's anything that anyone would like me to elaborate on. Like I said, link in the description to where you can download this, or you can just make your own. I think I provided enough information here to where you can do this yourself. If you are proficient with Excel, it's really just basic math. It's kind of a lengthy, clunky algorithm to work out in Excel, but it is doable. Yeah, that's it. I hope someone finds this useful. If you did, blah, 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 all the YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, comment, whatever. Stay tuned for more content. I have a lot of other projects coming up. So that's all. Peace.